Thanks, Lindsay. It's great to be with you today, and what I thought I would do is talk to you for about 20 to 25 minutes on what I think the state really needs to invest in to prepare us for the future, and that's innovation and entrepreneurship, as you might have imagined, since that's basically my life. And after I speak to you, what I want to do is turn it back on you and get your ideas for designing a school of innovation and entrepreneurship that we're trying to get off the ground in Fayetteville, because I think it's going to be a key piece of the puzzle as we move forward. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with these Thank God for Mississippi numbers. But if you look at them closely, I'm not quite so sure we have much to be grateful for. I'm trying to keep us, or at least I hope we can get to the point where people aren't substituting Arkansas for Mississippi, because we're at the bottom of quite a few of these metrics. But there are some bright spots. So if you look at where we are in some of the key figures in terms of innovation, we have some bright areas that we can build upon if we put our minds to it. But the question, I think, is which future are we going to create? So my question is, are we going to create a future that moves us up in the rankings in areas that are important for the future, or are we going to get mired more in a race to the bottom? What I thought I would do today, since this is the Festival of Ideas, is share with you some political thoughts that I have, which I never speak about in public because in general it's inappropriate. But I think it's really important here for us to start talking about it, because I feel like our current political climate is one of the key barriers we may have to moving forward. But I want to emphasize, well, you don't know what I'm going to say yet, but I hope it'll be something you agree with. What I'm about to share with you are my opinions. They're not the opinions of the University of Arkansas, the chancellor, the dean, anyone else. These are just from Carol Reeves here. So basically, when I moved here in 1990, I was impressed by some of the politicians we had, because it seemed like they were working together to advance the state regardless of their political parties, regardless of some of their principles or their priorities. There seemed to be this atmosphere of collaboration here. There was a reasonableness that I admired, even though I disagreed with some of the decisions that were being made. I still felt like there was a generosity of spirit here. So some of you may be saying, well, what on earth does that have to do with innovation and entrepreneurship? I think it's going to be hard for us to attract the type of talent that we need in this state if we provide a constant stream of highlight films for the Colbert Report and the Daily Show. I don't want to count on states like, you can clap, North and South Carolina and Arizona and Oklahoma, as John Brummett would put it, to make us seem progressive by comparison. I would like us to be known as a southern state with a difference. So when I was being recruited, and this was before email, so we actually got real letters, and my advisor said, put your letters in two piles: the schools you want to get an interview with and the schools that you're not considering. And the schools I wanted to interview with was actually much smaller than ones that I didn't want to consider. And he looked through all of the ones where I said I don't want to look at these schools, and he moved only one school, and that was the University of Arkansas. And he said, you really ought to consider them. And I said, well, why? I really don't want to move to Arkansas because this is the picture that was burned in my brain. It was the only thing I knew about this state. And I said, my one piece of knowledge about Arkansas is that Orville Faubus called out the National Guard troops to prevent the integration of Central High, and I don't want to move to such a regressive state, which is kind of funny because I was moving from Georgia and Lester Maddox. But he was right. He said, no, you really need to go check them out, and I did, and I've never looked back. I was obviously very ignorant of the great things that were going on in this state, but I feel like in the last couple of years we've had legislation proposed and enacted that seems to be more from the 1950s or even the 1920s than from where we need to be in the next 75 years. So I guess what I would advocate is that those of us who care about the future of the state really have to get involved and start electing politicians who are reasonable, who do work together, who enact legislation that will move us forward rather than taking us back. I've heard Grant Tennille make a statement several times that really sums up the essence of my fears. He says, I've never lost an employer moving to this state because of our tax rates. But I've lost multiple employers who won't move here because we have an undereducated workforce. And that is exactly the way I feel when I go out and talk to people and try to recruit entrepreneurs and investors to come to Arkansas. Do these numbers scare any of you as much as they scare me? Again, it's back to thank God for Mississippi sort of numbers. I think we have to do better. We have to do better for our kids. And if you don't have kids or you don't really care about your kids, I would argue that we have to do better for ourselves. If we don't have an educated population that can create the types of jobs we need for the 21st century, who's going to be paying the taxes we need to build roads, for safety and security, for other vital services? Someone's got to do that, and it has to be people who have well-paying jobs. So basically, the point I'm trying to get across here is I think that the political climate and the leadership in this state really have a tremendous impact on our ability to attract the type of forward-thinking people that we need to attract here. When I tell people I'm from Arkansas, what I'd like them to think about is not the picture of Central High, but I'd like them to envision the picture on the right, which is people who came together and worked to transform the state so that we're a state that is viewed for its transformation rather than a state that could never escape its past here. So that's all my political remarks, and I hope they weren't too pessimistic, but I do think it's important that we have people start to talk about this, because I think it is going to hurt us in the future if we're not aware and take care of some of this stuff. But what really keeps me going is some of the stories I'm about to tell you, which I think are a lot more upbeat. And they illustrate the progress we've made at the University of Arkansas over the last few years, and it's also the reason I think we have a lot to look forward to in the future here. So when I moved here in 1990, and we had a few small business management classes, but that was basically the extent of our entrepreneurship education. We didn't have any innovative approaches to teaching our students. We didn't have any innovative classes. And then in 1996, recent Business Hall of Fame inductee Frank Fletcher gave us money for something that was really revolutionary at the time, which was a student-run business/class at the college. And we started that business in 1996, and it's still growing strong 17 years later. And we've had hundreds of students go through the class. They've gotten real hands-on experience running what we hope they come to feel is their own business, and it's really transformed some lives. So this is a picture of Teresa Fetty. If any of you are from Fort Smith, you may know the famous Fetty sisters. There were 4 of them, all of whom went through SAIC. And Teresa was honored this year as one of the Fortune magazine's 10 most powerful women entrepreneurs. And if you read her remarks, what she lays her success to is SAIC and her experiences there, where she had to take responsibility for a business, and she's built on them. This Provident Trust that she's found has just been an unbelievable turnaround story out in Arizona. In 2005, Cecil and Gwendolyn Cupp gave money to the university that endowed my professorship, and what we used that money for was to send our students out to national business plan competitions. When the students went out, what they found was we actually were pretty decent at this, and so they started building up a lot more confidence about their ability to compete with schools like Carnegie Mellon and MIT, other schools that were facing out on what's known as the circuit. And in 2009, we won our first national business plan competition. This is the Tears for Life team. I will forever be indebted to them for this. When Jared came and sat in my office and said he was going to win a national business plan competition, I think I laughed at him, because I said, you have no idea how hard that is to do. It's just these other teams are incredible. He said, no, I'm going to do it. And so they went out, and they did do it. And since 2009, we've been the most successful university in the world at these business plan competitions. But what I think is really important for you to understand is that they're not academic competitions, they're really for investment. And I'll give you one example. Rice University hosts the largest, the most prestigious, and the most lucrative business plan competition in the world. They had over, I think it was $1.3 million in cash prizes last year. And they did a study of the teams who had gone through the Rice competition and the universities that had competed there. And one of the key metrics they looked at was the number of teams different schools had placed in the finals. Making the finals at Rice is like making the Final Four in basketball. It is unbelievably difficult. I'll give you some perspective on that. 1,600 teams apply for one of 42 competition slots at Rice. So just to get in is crazy, and 6 teams make the finals each year. And so I think when some people saw the list, they weren't too surprised by 5 of the top 6 names on that list. But I think there were a few eyebrows raised when they saw who came in at number 2, which is the University of Arkansas. We had one fewer finalist team than Michigan with 5. But we have very good company, and there are some schools you might have expected to be on that list who weren't there, like Stanford. Now, I'm not going to stand here with a straight face and tell you, oh yes, we give our students just the same entrepreneurship educational experience as Stanford. Sometimes Stanford doesn't come to these because they don't need to come to these. But still, it shows that we can compete with schools like this. So since 2009, as Lindsay mentioned, we've won 19 of these business plan competitions. The students have taken home more than $2 million in cash prizes, which is a lot of money to most of us. They've also been in the finals or won 27 other awards, like elevator pitch competitions. In 2012, the University of Arkansas became the first school in history, 25-year history of Venture Labs investment competition, which is like the Super Bowl of this circuit. We became the first school to have 3 different teams win a qualifying competition. And it was really fun to be on the plaza at UT Austin and have this guy talk about all the Arkansas teams there, and they call the Hogs. It was a lot of fun. And then last year, all 4 of our teams qualified for Moot Corp, or it used to be called Moot Corp, Venture Labs. So we were the first school to ever have 4 teams compete. This year, right now, I've got 6 teams, so I don't know what's going to happen. That would be too crazy to even think of. But I think our students are world class, and I don't think we need to swallow our words when we make that proclamation. But what's more impressive is what they've done outside of the classroom. So they have raised over $25 million in government grants, incentives, and also private investment to build these companies. They've started 10 knowledge-based companies that employ about 100 people, most of whom have PhDs. They have, if you look at the results of what they've done that aren't even part of that 10, we have 6 technologies that have been advanced by other companies that I'm not even counting. For example, Tears for Life, the group I showed you before, they had a UAMS technology that detects breast cancer using women's tears. They didn't have the scientific talent to take it forward, so they returned that technology to UAMS, and it was subsequently picked up by another company, Ascendant Diagnostics in Fayetteville. It has a world-class CEO and scientific team, and they are getting to the point of commercialization and also saving women's lives there. So we've really had a tremendous amount of success outside the classroom as well. Some of you may be aware of 2 fairly recent hires up at the University of Arkansas. On the left is Dr. Jim Rankin, who is the Vice Provost for Research and Economic Development, and on the right is Dr. Eli Jones, who came to us last year, who is the Dean of the Walton College of Business. And they saw the successes we've been having in entrepreneurship, and they said, you know what, we can build on those. And I think these are very smart men, maybe because they are big entrepreneurship supporters. But I actually met with them when they said they wanted me to do this, and I said, well, how big can I dream? Is this a little dream or is this a big dream? And they said, dream big. And so that's what I'm doing. And throughout the fall, I'm hosting several events around the state, and you are actually my inaugural audience, so thank you very much for being a guinea pig for this, on what a school of innovation and entrepreneurship should look like. And the first thing I'm going to be asking people is, what would success look like? So in a few minutes, that's what I'm going to be asking you to give me feedback on. But before I do that, I want to make the case for why I think we need a school of innovation and entrepreneurship. Does anyone know where this picture was taken? It could be almost anywhere, and it probably was, but I chose this one. It probably doesn't look like the site of the most thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem in the world, but that's what Silicon Valley looked like until the 1960s. So if you look at Silicon Valley today, it's home to 22 of the Fortune 500 companies, including well-known names like all the ones you see here. But Silicon Valley didn't come about until some visionaries, thought I'd weave that word in, got together. It was a few engineers from Fairchild Semiconductor, a venture capitalist from New York, and also Stanford University, so one of the great research universities in the world, got together, and they started spinning off all of these other companies. But 50 years ago, Silicon Valley was orchards. If you look at Research Triangle Park, it's much the same story. In 1959, some government leaders, politicians, at all levels of government, all levels of politicians, academic leaders, and some business leaders got together and said, hey, we need to do more for our citizens in North Carolina. And so they formed this Research Triangle Park that is today home to 170 companies that employ 50,000 people in high-wage jobs. So it used to be tobacco fields, and today it's a lot of very good employers. Austin may not have been quite a tumbleweed until recently, but until 1967, it was primarily the capital of Texas and home to UT. But IBM opened a major office there in '67, and then in the 90s, you had Dell and some of these other major tech companies. So now when we think about Austin, we think it's one of the coolest places to live in the country. It hosts South by Southwest, and it has all of these other high-tech companies here. And what I would argue is that we have a growing and improving university in Fayetteville around which we can build a world-class place to live. And just so you don't think I'm blowing smoke or even consuming smoke, I'm going to tell you a few stories that I hope can make this case. So these two individuals are Stan Zalowski and April Segabrook. They met in my class in the fall of 2007 and went out and competed in these business plan competitions in 2008. They won the inaugural Donald W. Reynolds Tri-State competition in Las Vegas, and while they were out competing, they were having fun, they were earning a little money, and a really funny thing happened, which is that they sort of started believing what they were saying, which was that we have a solution to a major pain in the market, and if you give us your money, we're going to make you rich. And basically what their solution is it's a software that other companies use to manage off-site employees. And they had six-figure jobs with a Walmart vendor that they didn't want to leave. I don't know why not, but they said, we'll pursue Movista over on the side while we continue to draw this big salary and also get health benefits. But at the urging of some people who'd seen them compete, in 2010, they looked each other in the eyes and said, okay, we've got to fish or cut bait here. And so they decided to quit their jobs, and they jumped over the cliff into the terrifying world of entrepreneurship. Over the past 3.5 years, they have, as Stan put it, borrowed, begged, mortgaged, and prayed our way over numerous hurdles, but their future looks really bright. So they have 12 national accounts now, including Meijer, Johnson Controls, and Tempur-Pedic. They're projecting revenues of over $4 million next year. They have 23 full-time employees at an average wage of $48,000, which is 150% of the state average. In addition to that, they've raised over $2.7 million to build their company, and they're out raising more money so that they can build the company even more. As Stan says, that they're cash flow positive, which means, or I'm sorry, not cash flow positive, cash flow possible, which means if they wanted to, they could kind of glide along the way they are and make a good living for themselves and their family, but they really want to build this business so that it's very big, and so they still need money to build it. But they've done a lot more than Movista. This is Tuscan Trotter, a restaurant on the Bentonville Square. I don't know, it's a good restaurant. It's kind of a funky restaurant. They have 25 full-time employees there. They founded the Downtown Bentonville Renaissance Cooperative, which has been at the forefront of Bentonville revitalization. Is everyone here from Little Rock? Most people? Some? Where? North. Okay. It's funny how I don't understand the politics down here much better than some of the ones up in Northwest Arkansas, but I do know I'm supposed to differentiate those. But if you went to Bentonville 5 years ago and you went to Bentonville today, you would not recognize the place. It is so different, and there's an energy in the air there that is almost palpable, and Stan and April have been at the forefront of a lot of that energy. They've also opened 4 other businesses. There's another property called the Crabtree property that they've renovated. They serve on the board of directors of numerous nonprofits in the area. They mentor my students, and the list just goes on and on. So if you look at what they've done in the last 3.5 years, it's just exhausting. But just so you don't think that is a unique situation, I want to introduce you to Douglas Hutchings and Seth Shoemate. Douglas competed in my class in 2009 and 2010. He's the CEO and founder of a company called Silicon Solar Solutions, and his first employee was Seth Shoemate, another PhD student in microelectronics photonics. Seth is kind of a mad scientist. He cleaned up for his wedding, which is where that picture was taken. But in his free time, he reads technical articles. And so when he was reading one of the thousands of technical articles he's read over the last few years, he saw a graph. And he said, you know, that could apply to solar. And he knew that because he'd been working in this solar startup for over 2 years. And so Seth formed a team with another PhD student, Trish Flanagan, who Chad talked about earlier, who is one of the co-founders of Noble Impact, and a Master's of Accountancy student. And they went out and they competed last year. Even if I could tell you what their technology does, which I can explain it very generally. It is extremely technical. But basically, on a solar cell, if you apply their technology, more sunlight can come in, so more electricity can go out, which is a huge deal. And if that technology is scalable, and there's every indication that it will be, it's going to be the greatest leap forward in solar panel efficiency since 1972. So that's 40 years. That technology came from the University of Arkansas, and it came from 2 students at the University of Arkansas, both of whom grew up in Arkansas. So we have something that we can really be proud of there. They've been awarded $650,000 in grants, and the last $500,000 of that was for an award called the Sunshot Grant from the Department of Energy, which I doubt any of you has ever heard of. But it's been equated to a Nobel Prize for a solar startup. So it's something we're really, really proud of. And Douglas, Seth, and April still have not reached their 30th birthdays. So wait, there's more. I'm not going to go into the depth with these, but Cyclewood Solutions created a biodegradable plastic bag that's going to be in stores at the end of the month. Ellen Bruni with Boston Mountain Biotech has created a protein purification process that's going to make it possible for pharmaceutical companies to pursue orphan drugs economically. Biologics MD has an osteoporosis treatment that's 3 times more effective than any on the market today. And I could go on, but I think you get the point. So if you look at statistics, about 75% of net new job growth across the country comes from new knowledge-based companies. The question I ask myself at night is, are we providing the education that our students need to create those jobs, or is this really a better description of how they view their education? Well, it's the big highlight of the thing. Let me try one more time clicking. If not, I might... You can tell when I grew up. What I want to do, I really like you, is blast down those walls. I want to create an educational system that generates the type of excitement, enthusiasm, and energy that comes from young people trying to think up new approaches to the most pressing problems in the world. I want students pulling all-nighters trying to figure out if a $46 pressure cooker they bought from Walmart can achieve the same effect as a $500,000 piece of equipment at a solar plant manufacturer, which, by the way, it did. I want my students to stay in Arkansas, start businesses, and get filthy rich. And then I want them to reinvest that wealth in other startups in the area and also mentor them. I think a small group of our students has shown that they're up to the challenge, but there are too few of them. So my basic question that I'm trying to come up with an answer to, that I hope you will help me with, is what would happen to Arkansas if we had 50 Movistas, or if we had 100 Movistas, or 500 Movistas. If we can create an educational system here that has developed scientific and technical talent and marries that with an entrepreneurial mindset and entrepreneurial tools, and then combine that with government investment and leadership from our politicians, what I think we can do is create a university in a state that's never going to be the same. I believe a School of Innovation and Entrepreneurship is a key piece in this puzzle that's going to get us to the future that we want. So I'm going to turn this back on you now. I'd like your ideas on what success for a School of Innovation and Entrepreneurship would look like. I've been told to dream big. This is a field. I want to dream. I showed you before and after pictures of Silicon Valley and Stanford and the Research Triangle Park and Duke, North Carolina, NC State, Austin with UT. So now we've got Fayetteville and we've got our field. So the basic question is, if you had a blank canvas and a very large budget, they haven't told me I have to compromise on that yet, and I came back to you in 10 years, and I said, remember when we were talking about that School of Innovation and Entrepreneurship? Well, we've done X, we've done Y, and we've done Z. You would say, I am so glad I was there at the beginning, and you get an A+ for the job. For those of you who aren't familiar with academic jargon, a school, just so you know, is kind of like a super department. So it's, this school will be housed in the Walton College of Business, but it will involve faculty and students from across campus. So we will have engineering students, science students, art students, design students, all involved with this here. So that's our canvas. And what I wanted to do now is get your input for what those ideal outcomes would be. And I'm going to type these up so I have a record later.
There's so many cool things I want to say, but I'll try to limit them. First of all, I really appreciate your political courage because it's really important, and I appreciate that and I respect it, and I think we should listen to that. Just a couple of things. The one thing that I come from a K-12 world, and I think there really are profound implications about the relationship between what you're talking about and how we prepare kids to even think about what you've talked about.
Right.
But the one thing's missing, I think, for me, and it strikes me that one of the cool things that's going on with the students is that they're finding their passions and interest. What Movista's doing in Bentonville obviously is grounded in what they're passionate and interested in. I don't think that we attend much to the passions and interests of young people in K-12 settings. In fact, it's all now even more centralized, what with Common Core, with more centralized decision-making, with maintaining the 19th century Prussian structure, particularly for adolescents. We saw a little bit of that here today. So the other thing is that we know that particularly from Sweden and other places, that cognition, that if you connect more joyfulness and kids being able to follow their own passions and interests, they're going to be highly motivated. So this issue of motivation. But here's the thing. I think that if there were a way to also connect your conversation with how it is we're thinking about education writ large in the state, how do we create some new space for, whether it's an innovative school district, the state kind of helping create a space for that really creates, in particular, I think, more forms of student judgment making that isn't just obsessed about this inexact, imperfect science of psychometrics, so that we deepen our quest for how we judge innovation, frankly, but in particular academic success, achievement. To that end, I think about the K-12 schools that I think might provide some interesting images of hope and possibility for your inquiry. One is the School of Innovation and Inquiry in Victoria, British Columbia, a school that incorporates multidimensional approaches to curriculum, but the curriculum really is developed by the students in conjunction with teachers who are facilitators. So there are no subjects. So how do you bring together that? The other one, the most powerful, I think, is the network of the Met schools with the nonprofit Big Picture Inc., where students are working 3 days a week in community on issues of importance through internship. The final thing I want to just mention is the college thing is, Herb Cole just released a new book called The Question is College. We are indebting students up to the kazoo. There are issues about what colleges should do, affordability. How do we create some new forms of inquiry around not having to think that everybody has to go to college, but acknowledging, as Mike Rose at UCLA has done, that we need second chances and other ways to acknowledge, in fact, what intelligence is. So it strikes me that the makers movement is an example of that, and how people connect hand and heart and hand and job. Anyway, so the opportunity to look at different images, maybe you could bust up some of the work going on in the College of Ed and imagine that they're working with you to think about different space, K-12. That doesn't happen very much at the university level. So those are some ramblings on a Saturday afternoon.
Okay.
I would like to add that there's something that I have noticed from my days in high school and middle school. I went to a standard small town rural education school, and we had a pretty good educational program. They had a good program for the students that were willing to go above and beyond. They would help those kind of students out. But a lot of the average students were left behind in the public school that I went to. And we were kind of somewhere on the upper end of the upper average of schools. But the problem that I see that we tend to have is we over-cloister our education and our successes. My concern about forming a new school that's specified in this would be that we already have successes in some schools. You know, we have ASMS in Hot Springs, where I eventually went. We have Fayetteville High is a great public school. And then, you know, there's just different ones across the state. But the large majority of schools are kind of left behind. They may have a few that succeed, but they kind of leave everyone behind.
I want to stop just to make sure that's not the type of school I'm talking about.
Okay.
Okay. So this isn't an independent school. It's called a school within a university. So in universities we have departments, we have colleges, like the College of Business, College of Engineering. Departments would be management, finance, accounting, biology, et cetera. And what I'm talking about is something above those departments, but underneath a college. The school would be equivalent to the university. We're not talking about another university.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying that as far as developing innovation and entrepreneurship in the state of Arkansas, I would believe that our main goal would be to spread that as a pilot program to different parts across the state where we do have those lower initiatives. And a problem seems to be that everything gets to be kind of to the district level. And I would say that one of the solutions that we would need to start with is how do we get the whole state on board with developing this innovation across the state so that we can find the talent that we do have within our state and keep them here and develop them.
Let me just orient my comment about North Little Rock. I had an opportunity to serve as mayor over there for 24 years. So Pat Hayes is my name, and I left office the best way. I decided not to run for re-election, so not exited by the voters. But over the 24 years, one of the things I started encouraging us to do things in our city, that had a lot to do with placemaking, to try to create the kind of environment that people would want to be community. And so there's one caution. I think Fayetteville has it. I know Dan Cootie, who was mayor up there for a while, and then Lionel Jordan has carried that on with the trails and, of course, Dixon
Right.
Street and the Walton, the input that they have. I think, I'd almost disagree that you can't do this all over the state. You need to pick several areas, and I know we're working on an innovation center in our downtown area in North Little Rock, and it has several components, and I won't go into detail, but maybe share that a little bit later. I think, Silicon Valley seems to work, and it didn't just all of a sudden happen overnight, but it worked in large measure, I think, because it created a community. I mean, Stanford is right in the neighborhood. There's some other, colleges certainly up in that area. There were other aspects, I think, that added to the kind of quality of life that they had. And so I don't think that you can exclude that kind of community, whether it be a transit system, whether it be trails, whether it be an opportunity to have front porches in your residential areas. I think that the collaboration not only takes place on campus, but that kind of collaboration goes into the home, into the grocery store, into the restaurants, and to me, what's really going to work, and I think that it can spread out among the different areas. Like, I know we're working on a recycling operation in East Arkansas that may employ 200 people, but it's got to get its birth and beginnings, and then you try to move these out to places that can really function. And obviously a workforce is an absolute key. I mean, that's one of the things that is extremely critical in trying to do that, and the education is a challenge. But I think you can't just put these anywhere. They've got to have certainly a much broader support and quality of life atmosphere to really make them successful, because the kind of people that you want are the kind of folks that want that kind of collaboration, and it's not only on campus, but it reaches out into the community.
A public service component. You can put that on time.
Thank you.
Okay, from what you've said so far, I cannot understand exactly, your vision where you want to go with the implementation of the entrepreneurship innovation. Okay, the Fayetteville, the campus in Fayetteville, being the incubator, that's where those minds are incubated. The students, kind of rally up and then come up with visionary ideas in the life. But I think we need a central implementation strategy, in other words, implementation strategy place like here in Little Rock. It could be a workshop. It could be a workshop that will be able to attract people, students from all over the place. Fairview be the entrepreneur, saying no bad. Have some kind of practical implementation lab or workshop where different students can come and implement their ideas. Okay, Arkansas itself, I mean, I've read so much about this state. It got so many people that out there to support innovative ideas here in Arkansas. So many people, as long as you can come up with an idea that's going to be implemented, hey, you have people that will, that will rally around you. So in other words, what I'm saying is Fayetteville is over there to incubate. Have a central point, a central lab where different minds from different states can come and implement their innovative strategies.
Okay. We're almost out of time, and I want to ask if you guys can just maybe shout out, but what I want to know are the X, Y, and Z, not how we're going to get there, but where I'm going to get my A. If I come back and say, here's what we have achieved, that's really what I wanted to ask you guys, because I want to know what we're supposed to be achieving before we figure out how we're going to achieve it. Yeah, do you want to?
Oh, shout it out. 10X are computer science graduates over the next 10 years.
Okay, thanks.
Carol, are you talking about like fields that you need to be focused on?
I'm talking about
As far as-
outcomes. Outcomes. So 10 times the number of computer science grads over the next 10 years, I get that completely. Like, I'm not saying that's what an outcome will ultimately have, but I want to know what I should be aiming for.
Well, I think you can add that to the field of environmental, because, and you and I have talked about that, but I think as far as adding entrepreneurs into the field who are focused on environmental issues, I think what Mayor Hayes is talking about and things you and I have talked about privately, that's a huge field that's about to explode in Arkansas, and nobody even knows about it. And we need graduates coming out of the school, out of the colleges that are interested in that and entrepreneurial minded, because it's kind of the new frontier. So I'd add to that and just add it to that field.
Every major needs to learn how to read and write some form of code. I think that's definitely a top priority. Probably need to start within the high school realm. And adding on to the addition of more computer science majors really need to have some kind of basic knowledge of business, as well as graphics, user interface, user experience design. Because yeah, we definitely need more programmers, but we need the types of programmers that understand how either the business will run or how to not just make something work, but make it user-friendly. Like, they need to understand that component as well.
For me, I'd be really interested in seeing at a school of innovation things like what Stanford does with their design school, design thinking, getting interdisciplinary students in one place to kind of approach problems together with their different backgrounds. I also get really excited about seeing schools that offer idea villages or incubating spaces where students can start startups and have avenues to plug those in and get them going. And I apologize for not knowing what's already in place at your school, but I think building those things, especially at the Walton School that has a very certain reputation of being supply chain management or very connected to Walmart, building up the name for, hey, we are more than just Walmart and connected there. Like, that is our heritage, but we have this other huge innovation component too. Like, building up that reputation is a very tangible outcome that I think would attract more talent to the school.
I would just like to suggest that maybe if we started with knowing who our students are rather than what they represent, and then apply our educational tool upon the foundation which the student brings to us.
So what's the outcome?
Well, I think the outcome is superior outcome. Personally, I have masters in 3 areas and doctorates in 2, but had anyone knew who I was, where I grew up, my culture, my values, my belief systems, and applied educational techniques upon that, it may be pretty neat what kind of a guy I would have turned into.
Okay.
So I think we have to be who we are, but we also learn how to think more effectively. And it sometimes seems to me that educational system is one size fits all. And I don't think that gives us quite the same quality of outcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else?
This might be a little outside of the purview of the university, but double or triple the amount of investable capital into riskier asset classes.
Well, somebody would say if we get the ideas coming, capital will come too.
That's fine.
Right now, you guys require that all the students do the intro to business. I think you ought to see if you can't get that changed to where it's an intro to entrepreneurship, because I think that would be helpful no matter what their degree field is, to give them an idea about business, because it doesn't matter whether you're major in another college at the university or anywhere else. That would definitely open their eyes.
Okay.
I think an entrepreneurial course. Because there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that don't realize they're entrepreneurs because they've never heard the word before they went to college. I grew up in a rural community. Everybody in a rural community is an entrepreneur. They just don't realize it because they don't have the language to put behind what they actually have seen every day of their life for 18 years. So to expand their vocabulary in that way would probably open up a whole mess of students that you didn't even realize you could tap into.